Airplanes are supposed to be places of routine, where strangers share armrests in silence while trusting unseen systems to carry them safely through the sky. On this flight, though, routine shattered the moment a young black mother buckled into her seat with her baby pressed against her chest. The cabin smelled of recycled air and burnt coffee, and the low hum of engines wrapped everyone in a false sense of calm. She adjusted the tiny oxygen cannula taped gently beneath her baby's nose, checking it the way she had learned to do in hospital rooms and waiting areas, counting breaths, watching for color, listening for the soft whistle that meant air was flowing. Her baby's eyes were wide, curious, unaware of how fragile his body was, unaware of how quickly safety could turn into danger. Across the aisle, a flight attendant strode forward with clipped steps and a tight jaw. Her uniform was crisp, her smile absent, her eyes fixed not on the baby's face but on the tubing and the small, portable device resting on the mother's lap. Other passengers glanced up, sensing tension the way animals sense a storm. The mother felt it too, a tightening in her chest that had nothing to do with altitude. She had flown before with her son, had paperwork folded neatly in her bag, had rehearsed explanations in her head for moments exactly like this. Still, when the attendant stopped in front of her, the words tangled in her throat. "You can't use that here," the attendant snapped, voice loud enough to slice through the cabin noise. "It's prescribed," the mother replied, forcing steadiness, lifting the documents with shaking fingers. "My baby needs it." "The doctor said I said you can't use it," the attendant cut in, leaning closer, her breath sharp, her tone edged with irritation that felt personal. "This is a safety issue." Passengers began to stare openly now, phones lowered, whispers rippled. The baby squirmed, sensing distress, his tiny hand curling into his mother's shirt. She rocked him gently, instinctively, while trying to keep eye contact, respectful, non-confrontational, careful in the way she had learned to be careful her entire life. "It's FAA approved," she said quietly. "We checked with the airline before boarding." The attendant laughed, a short, humorless sound. "I don't care what you think, you checked." Something in the way she said it, and the emphasis on "you," landed like a slap. The mother swallowed. Her heart pounded so loudly she wondered if others could hear it. She could feel eyes on her skin, judging, weighing, deciding who was believable. The baby's breathing changed, the rhythm slightly faster, and panic sparked in her gut. "Please," she said, "he's just a baby." The attendant reached out suddenly and grabbed the device, yanking the tubing free with a sharp motion that seemed impossibly violent for something so small. The soft whistle stopped. The baby let out a thin cry, confused, breath-catching. Time fractured. The mother screamed, a sound ripped from somewhere primal, as she clutched her child and tried to reconnect the line. "What are you doing?" she shouted. "You're hurting him." The attendant stepped back, arms crossed, expression cold. "You were warned," she said. "Now comply." The cabin erupted. Someone yelled for a supervisor. Another passenger stood, voice shaking with anger. A man across the aisle filmed openly, his face pale. The baby's cries weakened, turning from protest to distress, and the mother's world narrowed to the rise and fall of her son's chest, to the terrifying possibility that it might stop. She fumbled with the tubing, hands trembling, tears blurring her vision. "Help me," she begged. "Anyone, everyone. Please help my baby." A different flight attendant rushed over, eyes widening as she took in the scene. "What happened?" she asked sharply. She refused to follow instructions. The first attendant replied, defensive now, volume rising. "I did what I had to do." The second attendant knelt beside the mother without hesitation, reconnecting the oxygen with practiced speed. The baby gasped, then inhaled deeply, color slowly returning to his cheeks. A collective breath released across the cabin. The mother sobbed, pressing her lips to her son's hair, whispering apologies he could not understand. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, tense and controlled, requesting calm while crew assessed the situation. The plane felt suddenly smaller, heavier, burdened by what everyone had just witnessed. Anger simmered alongside fear, and the unspoken word hung in the air, thick and undeniable. Later, long after the plane landed and authorities boarded, statements were taken and stories compared. The mother sat wrapped in a blanket, baby sleeping fitfully against her, oxygen restored, heartbeats steady. She answered questions through exhaustion, through disbelief, through the familiar ache of knowing she would have to prove again that her fear was justified, that her pain was real. Videos spread before she even left the airport. Headlines formed. Opinions hardened. Some people questioned her choices, her tone, her presence. Others saw exactly what had happened and said so loudly. The image of a uniformed authority figure tearing away life support from a black infant seared itself into public consciousness, impossible to explain away. In the days that followed, investigations began. Policies were reviewed. Statements were issued, careful and bloodless, full of passive language and regret without responsibility. The attendant was placed on leave. The airline promised training, promised change, promised to do better. The mother returned home to a quiet apartment filled with the beeping comfort of medical equipment and the soft sounds of her child breathing. She replayed the moment over and over, the snap of tubing, the sudden silence, the way power had been exercised without empathy. She wondered how close she had come to losing everything, and how easily it had been done. At night, when sleep refused to come, she held her baby and stared into the dark, thinking about trust and how fragile it was. She thought about all the times she had been told to stay calm, to be polite, to comply, and how none of that had protected her son. She thought about the strangers who had spoken up and the ones who had looked away. This flight would be remembered as more than a viral clip or a shocking headline. For her, it would always be the moment the sky itself seemed hostile, the moment she learned that even at 30,000 feet, gravity could still pull Croakty straight into your lap. And as her baby breathed softly against her chest, alive despite everything, she promised herself that she would not be silent. Not now, not ever, because silence had almost cost her a life. The story did not end when the cabin doors opened. In many ways, that was when it truly began. Friends and family crowded around her in the days afterward, bringing food, offering help, holding the baby with reverence, as if touching him confirmed that survival was real. Each visitor asked the same question in different words, asking how something like that could happen, asking how anyone could be so careless, so cruel. She answered patiently at first, then less so, because explanations felt inadequate. There was no single mistake to point to, no misunderstanding neat enough to wrap with a bow. There was only a pattern she recognized, one she had spent her life navigating, where authority questioned her legitimacy and fear disguised itself as perceived. Reporters called, advocates reached out, lawyers offered consultations. He learned new vocabulary, phrases like negligence, liability, compliance review. She learned how quickly a human experience could be translated into bullet points. Through it all, she focused on her baby's routine, on medications and appointments, on the reassuring nods of nurses who treated her concerns with seriousness and respect. In those sterile rooms, she felt a measure of safety that the airplane had stolen from her. Online, the arguments raged. Some people insisted the attendant had been following rules, that safety required firmness, that emotions clouded judgment. Others dissected the footage frame by frame, pointing out the unnecessary aggression, the disregard for medical documentation, the way the mother's voice trembled while still trying to be calm. She read some of it, then stopped. Protecting her mental health became another task on an already heavy list. The airline's apology arrived in the mail, printed on thick paper, signed by someone she would never meet. It expressed regret for the distress caused. It assured her that the company valued all passengers. It did not say her baby's name. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer with medical records and boarding passes, artifacts of a journey she would never forget. At a community meeting organized by local activists, she spoke publicly for the first time. Her hands shook as she held the microphone, but her voice grew steadier with each sentence. She described the fear, the sound of the oxygen stopping, the way the cabin seemed to freeze. She described how quickly authority could turn dangerous when stripped of compassion. The room listened, silent, attentive, bearing witness in a way the airplane had not. Afterward, strangers hugged her, thanked her, shared their own stories. Patterns emerged, different settings but familiar dynamics. She realized that while her experience was uniquely terrifying, it was also painfully common, that knowledge brought both comfort and fury. Weeks passed. The investigation concluded with findings and recommendations. The attendant was dismissed. New training protocols were announced. News cycles moved on. For the world, the incident faded. For her, its echo remained, shaping decisions large and small. She planned future travel with meticulous care, weighing risks, considering alternatives, knowing that avoidance was not the same as safety. One afternoon, watching her baby sleep in a patch of sunlight, she noticed how strong his breathing had become, how his chest rose with confidence. The sight filled her with fierce joy. She kissed his forehead and whispered stories of resilience, stories he would not remember but would, she hoped, somehow absorb. She understood now that her role extended beyond motherhood into something larger, something she had not asked for but accepted. She would tell the story when needed. She would push for change when she could. She would teach her child that his life was precious, that he deserved care and respect in every space he entered. The sky no longer felt neutral to her. It was a reminder of both vulnerability and survival. And every time she heard the distant roar of an airplane overhead, she placed a hand over her baby's heart, grounding herself in the truth that he was here, breathing, alive, and that no one had the right to take that away. In quiet moments, she revisited the image of the attendant's face, trying to understand it, trying to find something human beneath the rigidity. She wondered what stories that woman carried, what fears shaped her reactions, what training had failed them both. Understanding did not equal forgiveness, but it softened the sharpest edges of her anger, allowing space for resolve instead of rage. She began working with organizations focused on patient rights and travel accessibility, lending her voice to panels and workshops. Each time she spoke, she emphasized preparation and advocacy, but also compassion, reminding audiences that rules exist to serve people, not override them. Her experience became a case study, cited in presentations and policy discussions, a reminder of what happens when empathy is removed from enforcement. Her baby grew milestones stacking one after another. First smiles, first attempts at crawling, first sounds that resembled laughter. With each achievement, the memory of that flight shifted slightly. No longer a singular terror but part of a larger story of endurance. She kept the oxygen device carefully maintained, still vigilant, still cautious, but no longer defined solely by fear. Fans noticed a change in her, a quiet confidence that had not been there before. She spoke up more readily, challenged assumptions, corrected misinformation without apology. The ordeal had stripped away some of her patience for injustice, replacing it with clarity. On the anniversary of the flight, she wrote a letter to her son. In it, she described the day honestly, without dramatization, focusing on facts and feelings. She told him how brave he had been without knowing it, how many people had stood up because of him, how his life had sparked conversations that mattered. She sealed the letter and tucked it away. A gift for a future version of him who might one day ask why his mother never stayed silent. Life moved forward, as it always does. There were ordinary days filled with chores and laughter, and hard days marked by appointments and worry. Through all of it, she carried the knowledge that survival was not passive, that it required attention, courage, and community. The fly had tried to take something from her, from them. Instead, it gave her a purpose she had not sought but would honor. And as she watched her child take his first unsteady steps across the living room floor, she knew with certainty that no matter where life carried them, she would always be ready to protect his breath, his dignity, and his right to exist without fear. She also learned to forgive herself, a quieter battle that took longer. In the aftermath, guilt had crept in during unguarded moments, whispering questions about different choices, different seats, different days. Therapy helped untangle those thoughts, teaching her that responsibility belonged where the harm occurred, not with the person who survived it. Healing, she discovered, was not linear, but it was possible. Sometimes, when strangers recognized her from the story, they spoke in hushed tones, offering sympathy or praise. She accepted it politely, then redirected the conversation toward broader issues, toward systems rather than individuals. Fame, Even fleeting was not her goal. Change was. As her son grew stronger, the medical equipment slowly became less central, moving from the living room to a corner, then into storage. Each step felt like a small victory. Each clear breath was a reminder of how close everything had come to unraveling. She did not know what the future held, but she knew who she was now: a mother, an advocate, a witness. The sky could no longer frighten her in the same way, because she had faced its worst moment and emerged with truth in her hands. And when she finally boarded another plane, months later, she held her son close, met the crew's eyes, and trusted herself above all else, ready to speak, ready to act, ready to protect the life she loved more than anything. The engines roared, the cabin settled, and as the aircraft lifted, she breathed steadily, counting alongside her child, both of them rising together, grounded not by fear, but by the unbreakable certainty that their voices, once found, would never be taken again. They flew forward carrying memory, courage, and hope into open skies, together.